When you look at the headline numbers, 147,000 jobs added, there's no denying that this is a very resilient labor market economy. And I've spoken to so many economists since Liberation Day who have said to me time and time again that despite the solid numbers we've seen in previous months, they said, Zain, wait till June. June, you will see that. We'll start to see the impact in the hard data of the sort of wavering tariff policy. That's not happening.
You expected some of this, but this is better than expected?
Yeah, Sarah, it is. Look, this jobs market is like the Energizer Bunny. Every single time we expect it to run out of steam, it just keeps going and going. So these new numbers show that the U.S. economy added 147,000 jobs in June. That was well ahead of the expectation of about 118,000, well ahead of some whispers that we heard on Wall Street of a sub 100,000 number. So this is indeed beating expectations. We were also expecting a slowdown. We did not get that. This is basically in line with May, which was revised higher. It's also good news. The unemployment rate was expected to go up. It didn't. It went down to 4.1%. That is a very healthy number. This is still relatively historically low.
You know, they're just not very good at this. And perhaps it's long past the time that they finally acknowledge that, because for yet another straight month in another economic metric, as it feels like we're talking about day after day here, the Donald Trump economy has once again defied expert forecasts and so-called expectations. Of course, this is in total contrast to the sky is falling narrative that we actually covered ourselves yesterday in regards to the unofficial jobs numbers out of the AFP jobs report, which I told you, by the way, was historically wrong. It was unreliable. It is generally inconsistent with the official government data. But ladies and gentlemen, as of today, as of this morning, the official real jobs and unemployment report is out for the month of June. And not only does it show positive growth in stark contrast to the supposed job losses we heard about yesterday that I told you don't take all that seriously. This is the official data out now. But on top of that, the jobs growth, guys, in the month of June, once again, I'm pretty sure it's been basically like every month of the Trump presidency at this point, right? But once again has surpassed the so-called expert expectations, and the stock market appears to be loving it. The liberals are silent. And keep in mind, guys, this is all coming at the same exact time. Wait, the Trump economy already trending upward, doing well. This is despite the fact that Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, which is a tax bill primarily, right, that will have big economic implications there in terms of growth, is yet to pass. It's yet to be enacted into law. Once that formally gets signed tomorrow on July 4th, which is the current timeline here that they're expecting, you can expect growth and consumer confidence as well as investor and business confidence to go up dramatically. And this is also given the fact, by the way, that Fed Chair Jerome Powell, as we've been covering, has been historically stubborn on refusing to lower the interest rate. So in other words, what we're saying there is, despite all of this, despite a lot of people trying to work against the Trump economy, and the fact, by the way, you have the tariffs that I was told were supposedly supposed to crash the entire thing, the Trump economy once again is strong. And I want to tell you all about that in today's video. Again, in total contrast to the unofficial jobs report yesterday that I told you to not take very seriously, where we supposedly had 33,000 jobs lost in the month of June. Well, the official jobs report is out today showing that the U.S. hiring once again defied expectations, which really makes you wonder, at what point do we just change the expectations themselves? With 147,000 jobs added last month, the unemployment rate declined to 4.1%. For reference there, before I believe it was 4.2 to 4.3%, so a slight decline there in unemployment. But on top of that, the Dow Jones economists were forecasting just 110,000 jobs will be added, so that is once again a surpassing of those expectations. And the stock market, as I said, is loving it. Take a listen to those full details here for yourself.
Anything's possible. We'll know shortly. Obviously, it's the big June jobs report. I wouldn't look for this to make an easy more likely. 147,000 jobs. Definitely a bit better than expected, no matter what your range was, whether it was closer to 100 or 115,000. It's a pretty good number. And guess what? If we look at the 2-month revision, it's positive. It's up 16,000. How does 147 stack up? Well, it's pretty odd because it's exactly where we were in April, unless they revise that. To find a higher number than that, well, you're going back to last year. So this is tied for the, second best, tied for the first best number of job creation of the year. Now, let's look at the numbers for unemployment rate. That number is coming in at, it's coming in at... Where is it to underemployment? There it is, 4.1%. Sorry, folks, we do this on the fly. 4.1%, and obviously 4.1 equals where we were in February to find a lower unemployment rate the beginning of the year when it was at 4%. Now, if we look at average hourly earnings, up 0.2, we're looking for up 0.3, and the rearview mirror is up 0.4. Up 0.2 equals where we were in April. To find a lower number, you really have to go back in the Wayback Machine. You're going all the way back to August of 23 when it was up 1/10. So earnings are something to pay attention.
You can see that things have slowed down from last year, but not in an alarming fashion, right? We did expect to have weaker numbers here in the last few months. And so really things are holding up a lot better than feared. The unemployment rate, again, it's nowhere near where it was a few years ago. It does remain, look at this, the unemployment rate, it's still hovering at very low levels. Now, digging into where the jobs are, we did see significant job gains for healthcare and social assistance, adding 59,000. Leisure and hospitality, that's bars, restaurants, 20,000. But there was job loss in two notable areas. Manufacturing, 7,000 jobs lost last month alone. That's the exact opposite of what the president wants with his high tariff strategy. The federal government losing 7,000, and that is, of course, a result of DOGE really taking an axe to the federal workforce. But still, big picture, when you put it all together, this is a lot better than expected, and it does suggest that this jobs market is holding up better than feared.
Yeah, barring the manufacturing, President Trump has something to crow about. He has something to talk about because it is a lot better than we're talking, 30,000 more jobs than expected,
right,
plus
and
or
not the slowdown that was predicted.
Yeah, all right.
So yeah, very strong numbers to say the least. And it's worth noting, even on that manufacturing front, I wanted to kind of research and actually dig into this because, on the surface you hear that, losing manufacturing jobs, but where are the losses coming from? It turns out, based on at least what I was able to gather here, that the two major areas of loss came from these companies right here. First of all, Intel, right? The, tech processor companies, etc., basically announced significant layoffs to its manufacturing workforce, which you have seen this trend, by the way. Intel, Microsoft, a lot of tech companies, unfortunately, by the way, this is a reality that, frankly, I think the Trump administration absolutely needs to address. By the way, there has been this big back and forth between the original kind of populist MAGA people versus the tech bros over the question of H-1B visas. You did also see this month a negative sign, by the way, something that immigration reform truly ought to address, is that there was a layoff of about 9,000 U.S. workers in Microsoft, while Microsoft simultaneously applied for a new application of 6,000 H-1B workers, aka foreign guest workers. And so that is a question that needs to be addressed. But nonetheless, there are still positive signs even on the regard of the foreign workforce versus native born. But that's number one, right? Intel, a tech company. And secondly, the big losses in manufacturing came from Enphase Energy, which is, guess what? As you could expect, by the way, given the recent debate over the big, beautiful bill and the fact that the subsidies for these types of industries are ending, Enphase, a solar technology and electric vehicle charger company. Oh, right. Well, now that makes sense, right? Laid off 500 employees in anticipation for the big, beautiful bill, which is apparently about 17% of its workforce, etc. So worth noting there, right, where the losses actually come from. I think the context there is important, and we'll see in the coming months as you have the plants and stuff moving back to America, whether manufacturing ends up gaining more or losing more. But we'll find that out later down the line. Just wanted to point out that aspect of the situation. Still, nonetheless, you also see, okay, so leisure is going up. Yeah, that's, summertime tourism season. Okay, that probably makes sense. That's usually a normal trend. But also take a look at that, right? Healthcare adding a lot of new jobs. That's very interesting because I kept hearing, right? Currently, so much fear mongering about this big, beautiful bill over the idea that it's going to cut everyone's healthcare, right? The healthcare industry is going to go up in flames. 20 trillion Americans are going to be losing their access to health insurance and healthcare. So if that's the case, if the industry is about to be screwed here, why is the industry adding so many jobs, right? Very important question, frankly. I think a lot of people ought to be asking. But still, nonetheless, there you have the numbers. Dow Jones, by the way, way up in the green today. Investors seem to be enjoying. It's up 300 points already this morning. And take a look at this as well, okay? You also have even more positive jobs numbers, not out of the month of June, but it turns out from the past 2 months of April and May, because notably here, right, the jobs report from April, it just came out today, was revised up by 11,000 jobs from adding a 147K to now 158K. May jobs report, by the way, revised up by 5,000 more jobs from 139,000 to 144,000. In other words here, guys, the original jobs reports actually further, which were good, by the way, which were still celebrated by Trump supporters, were actually underestimated, right, what the actual jobs numbers here were. And as you can see, a good point here made. Is it weird that the job reports, as you'll see, look at this chart, right? These are the revisions of the jobs reports. During Joe Biden's presidency, were almost always revised downward, right? Basically here saying that, well, we were wrong. We overestimated how many jobs there were. Whereas Trump's things after the fact are almost always revised upward. And like, take a look at that right here, right? So this is Joe Biden's presidency. So you have, for instance, January 2024. Huge jobs report. Oh, let's revise it down massively, right? Basically, almost no jobs were added, but we're going to pretend like it was a huge job thing. Red. October is the only month where, right before the election, where the jobs report was ever revised up, slightly up. And then, as you can see, goes back down as in Joe Biden's last month, etc. And then look at what is happening here as we just reported. April and May, guess what, were revised upwards. That's an interesting trend, I don't know, to say the least, but there you have it. Even more positive jobs numbers, it turns out. But in regards to even the thing I was talking about earlier with H-1B, and again, that is a concern I think that ought to be addressed, especially now that you have this sort of falling out between Trump and Elon, the tech bros. I mean, okay, then in that case, I think it is time fully to go 100% MAGA in this regard, okay? The idea of replacing American students who have studied their whole lives for these tech jobs to import basically cheap foreign guest workers. It happens a lot with illegal immigration, happens also with legal immigration. It ought to be fully addressed here. Again, the rampant abuse there of the H-1B visa system. But still, nonetheless, despite some of those concerns, a big trend you are currently seeing here in the current jobs numbers is that not only are you seeing more jobs being created, but a massive change, a fluctuation here in the workforce of native-born workers versus foreign-born workers, of course. If you remember, if you ever questioned why the supposed economic prosperity under Joe Biden's presidency was never really felt by Americans, because he kept on saying this, right? GDP is at record highs. Look at all these new jobs being created, as he kept saying, and basically nobody could find a job. A big reason for that is because of the fact that the numbers time and time again told us that the vast majority of prosperity, of new jobs created, of new wealth created, etc., under Biden's presidency went overwhelmingly. I think the number was like 90% of new jobs created went to foreign-born workers and immigrants, basically, right? Non-native-born Americans. Now, nobody is inherently against them, getting jobs per se. But when you have an economy where basically immigrants and foreign guest workers and all these people, and illegals, by the way, obviously a big component of that as well, are overwhelmingly getting the jobs, whereas people who were, born in the country, regardless of their race or origin, they're American citizens, cannot find work. That is obviously a very concerning trend, and hence, again, why the Joe Biden presidency, the prosperity there, was not felt by a lot of people. Why? Because you probably had either an illegal alien or some H-1B temporary guest worker basically taking the so-called prosperity that was supposed to be felt here by Americans, and that trend is reversing. In the month of June, we have the new numbers out here that the native-born workforce under Trump has increased by 830,000 people, almost 1 million new native-born Americans finding opportunities in the economy, whereas foreign-born workers have decreased by 348,000 workers. A big, big trend. And by the way, this is something you have continuously seen these numbers separate from each other over and over again through Trump's presidency. And of course, this is all coming, guys, again, off the heels of the fact that, number one, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell notably and famously refuses to raise the interest rates. But also here, secondly, the fact that the big, beautiful bill which is supposed to be like an Energizer bunny, right? It's going to unleash a lot of new growth and productivity in the American economy. And by the way, once it becomes the law, you have investor and business confidence and stability, right? They know what's going to be happening next and good things are going to be happening next. But nonetheless, coming in the next few months, as this is implemented, that is an even bigger opportunity for potential growth and potential optimism going in the future. And that is what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent noted here today as Hakeem Jeffries continues here, by the way, to make his grandstanding and ridiculous speech.
What do you make of Hakeem Jeffries at the podium for more than an hour trying to discredit this bill right now?
Well, Maria, I'm not going to take firefighting advice from an arsonist. The Democrats had the majorities. They blew out the budget. They had the tons of wasteful spending, and we inherited a mess. And under President Trump's leadership, along with Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune, we are going to get the economy humming again via the private sector. This is a Main Street Working America bill. It is going to address the affordability crisis. We are going to increase working people's wages. And, you know, the Democratic Party at present doesn't stand for anything. They're just against everything. And you know, let's see where the economy is this time next year. Yeah. I think this bill, over the next year, we are going to see growth like we have not seen. And importantly, it is going to be non-inflationary growth, which is something the Democrats couldn't do.
My thoughts exactly here too, by the way, as I've been saying in regards to the supposed Medicaid cuts, the sky falling. Okay, well, let's let the bill get implemented as it will, obviously, like Democrats have basically no power to actually stop it. Let's see where we are by the 2026 midterms, and I guess the voters will decide whether Donald Trump destroyed everything or he did a decent job. With that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this, the jobs report, the economics numbers, etc., in this video. In the comment section down below, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.